We'll spend the second half of this week's show looking at the proposal to change the way Ohio draws its legislative and congressional districts. Right now, it's done by the Apportionment Board and state lawmakers, and here's how it works. Congressional districts are drawn by the House and Senate based on the census. So the House and Senate takes those numbers and they draw the district lines, and then it has to be approved by the governor. It's basically a law. State legislative districts for your state rep and state senator are drawn by the 5-member state apportionment board. That includes the governor, the secretary of state, the state auditor, and 2 lawmakers, 1 Democrat and 1 Republican. If voters pass issue 2, the job gets handed over to an unelected commission. We'll get to the details of that in a moment, but the commission has rules. The districts must preserve whole communities. The districts must be compact. They must maximize competitiveness and match the state's politically competitive balance. Dan Takaji, you're pushing this amendment change. You say the current system is the folks who do it are unaccountable. How does this unelected commission become more accountable than them?
The answer is really simple. When politicians draw their own lines as under the current system, the voters lose, because what politicians do is draw lines that maximize their own chances of themselves and their cronies getting reelected to office. So across Ohio, about 9 out of 10 districts are uncompetitive, which means that the election on November 6th is just a formality. We know who's going to win all of those seats.
But how is this commission, which is not accountable to the voter, going to be more effective in doing that?
Because it is accountable by virtue of its transparency. In contrast to the process we saw last year where partisan politicians drew their own districts, the process mandated by issue 2 would create a citizens commission and would expressly state that all its deliberations have to be conducted in the open. Contrast that with the process in which maps were drawn in a secret bunker.
Terry, in theory, elected officials are accountable. You vote for them. But there are very few one-issue voters who focus on redistricting. Aren't they unaccountable now on this issue?
Well, there's clearly a problem. One of the problems that's happened is the computers have gotten better and better. The partisanship on both sides is more intense. And clearly the maps we've got today I don't think are perfect, but the thing is, before anybody votes yes on this is going to change in the Constitution forever and ever. And I think there's a lot of technical problems in terms of how this would be done. And the Ohio legislature, even by a 99-0 vote, Democrats and Republicans, they can't fine-tune or fix any of these problems, like there's no ethics requirements on these members of this commission. They tried this in California, and to the credit of the Democrat Party, they took and hijacked it and drafted the districts the way they wanted.
There are some minor differences. Let's get to how this commission would be made up. It is a little complicated based on the amendment. Let's take a look. It's 12 members. Again, they are not elected. It's open to anyone who is not connected. No big donors, no politicians, no top-level bureaucrats in state government. Appeals court judges pick 42 semifinalists based on their merit. House leaders, 1 Democrat, 1 Republican, can disqualify 9 of those semifinalists. Then from that last pool, 9 members are picked at random by the appeals court judges, and then those 9 members pick the last 3 members of this commission. Dan Takaji, that is very complicated. Why so complicated?
For one reason, because this process from beginning to end, Mike, was designed to ensure that we have citizens with the capacity for impartiality. So we exclude people who are paid lobbyists, who are big money donors, who are partisan politicians or their cronies from the commission. We want to make sure that we exclude from this commission wolves in sheep's clothing. That is, partisans pretending to be nonpartisan. So this is truly a citizens commission made up of 12 ordinary Ohioans, 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, and 4 independents who are going to draw a fair and balanced map.
Terry, to be fair, don't you have to jump through a lot of hoops to get rid of the politics?
Well, there's some other ways to do it, and I'll suggest at the end when we look at the criteria of how these would be drawn, a way to solve this problem. But there's a reason why the State Bar Association, bipartisan, the groups of the appeals court judges, bipartisan, said, we don't want to be a part of this. And Brent Larkin, the plain dealer, one of the most respected political guys in the state, said it's stupid to put the judges, drag them in the middle of the politics. But it is convoluted, confusing how this would be drawn up. It invites one side politically or the other side to try and capture it and rig who's going to be on this committee.
Isn't it hard to do that based on that system where there's random draws? There's 42, then 36 semifinalists. I mean,
well, they did it in California, and to the Democrats' credit, they were very artful in how they manipulated the process. I think we need to move to a more simplified way. Pick between competitiveness, compactness, and communities and figure out which one's the most important, then set up a defined formula as far as how you're going to do it.
Dan, why the judges? Why are judges involved in this?
So let me say, just first of all, I love it when the partisans and political operatives like Terry talk about how confusing this is when they passed a 167-page bill drawing the screwy maps we have now. It's not that complicated at all. We want 12 ordinary people with the capacity for impartiality. And why are judges involved with this? Because they are the folks in our system who are most insulated from partisan politics. Who better than a judge to determine somebody's capacity for impartiality?
Let's get to those maps, which is, if not the reason, a reason why we are here. The current redistricting map, the one that voters will fill with their election next month. The great majority of these districts are uncompetitive. A few favor Democrats, more favor Republicans, and a few are kind of competitive. The districts are really creative. This is the 9th district. It's along Lake Erie. It's along the waterfront. You literally can walk across parts of this district fairly easily. This is the new Franklin County district, which favors Democrats. It's carved up to look a lot like a Rorschach psychology test. If you zoom in, you see what I call the Cape of Kilroy, that little peninsula that seemingly wants to include the house of former Congresswoman Mary Jo Kilroy, but they just missed. And then you have the Timken Peninsula. Up in the 16th district is given the appendage to include the Timken manufacturing plants, all of its employees / voters, and all of its owners / donations. Terry Casey, is that what we need? Is that what we have in Ohio? Is that the way it should be?
No, it shouldn't be that way. And by the way, the district, I live in Clintonville. We now have Pat Tiberi, but that little finger was drawn in case Dave Leland, the former Democrat state chairman, might have wanted to run in that new congressional district. So yes, it's not the best way to do things, but if one of the things that's been suggested, because 3 times the League of Women Voters and people have tried to come forward and say, let's fix this. What you need to do is get some people that really know how the process works, knows the complexity of Ohio, because he pitches, oh, we'll keep communities whole. One of the problems in Franklin County, we've got communities like Westerville, Reynoldsburg, Dublin, that are part in Franklin County, part in Delaware County, Dublin's partially in Union County. How are you going to keep these communities whole? Because each House district's about 110,000 people.
The amendment calls for compact districts, but it doesn't define compact.
Well, we do have a definition of compact, but here's the important thing. When voters see districts like these, which are not compact, the Snake on the Lake, Congressional District 9, or the district which I live in, which goes from the Columbus area, includes Upper Arlington, goes all the way down to Wilmington in the southwest, to Athens, Ohio University in the southeast, they know something screwy is going on. They know that politicians are serving their own interests, not the public interests. So we've got to do something about it. That's why we require compactness. That's why we require that communities, cities, and counties be kept together. That's why we require some degree of balance, so that in a state that's roughly 50-50 Democrats and Republicans, we don't have a map in which 3/4 of the district favor one party, and we've got to have some competition so that the election, the general election, actually means something rather than having practically every district decided in the primary.
Now, your amendment would set up a process, as you mentioned, that would not favor any political party, incumbent, or candidate. But it does. It favors Republicans and Democrats. What about other candidates, libertarians, Constitution Party candidates, Green Party candidates? Do they have a voice in how this map is drawn?
Let me be clear here. That is just not true, respectfully, Mike. This is a process that requires not only 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, but 4 independents, people who are affiliated with neither of the parties, and every one of the commissioners has to have the capacity for impartiality. In fact, we expressly require that no map can be drawn to favor a particular candidate or party. Now, this is a process that's gonna, for the first time in Ohio, in Ohio history, if issue 2 passes, look to the voters' interests, not to the interests of politicians or their allies like the OSBA, the lawyers' lobbyists.
You mentioned the California thing, which is similar to this, but it doesn't have rules about competitiveness. This does. Isn't that a good thing, Terry?
Well, if we decided that we want it all be about competitiveness, and you could measure it, and you could do that if that's the only criteria. The only problem is what you'd end up doing is taking inner city, predominantly African American areas of Cleveland or Akron or Canton, then you'd have to draw them down into areas like Holmes County in order to pick up and make the balance correctly in the 99 districts in Ohio. Ohio is a very diverse state, and one of the things I've learned in the past from other people who've actually done this, if you've got 99 House districts to draw, the first 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 or 15 can look pretty good and be pretty compact and pretty competitive, but then you got all these bits and pieces, and Ohio is not an easy uniform state in terms of all the population density.
Let's get to another big, issue,
right.
And that is how this commission is paid. What's the funding? Your side claims that this commission will have a blank check. PolitiFact, the independent fact-checking organization, says that's not true, that there is a language in the amendment that says funding necessary for the operation of this, which is pretty common in all state functions.
Well, necessary in their opinion, but it doesn't allow, because basically there's other parts of it. If the legislature would try and restrict how much they're going to pay themselves, how much they get in pension and health benefits, and how much they pay their friends or consultants they hire, they can just go to court and say, we believe this is necessary, give us the money. Now, yesterday, and this is something required under the Constitution, the OBM did an estimate, and the headline in today's Plain Dealer in Cleveland, the total was $15 million. Now, if we had an extra $15 million, I can think of a lot better places to spend it than this.
I love this because we've heard one whopper after another from the No on 2 people, and this is the latest one. First, they said that the commissioners would be chosen in secret. Not true. Next they said blank check. Now they've come out with this outrageous number, which is orders of magnitude off. Look,
30 seconds, why not limit spending on this commission?
When we had a competition, it cost $115,000 to do this. So they're roughly 100 times off in their estimate of the order of magnitude. There is nothing that partisan politicians and political operatives like Terry, God love you, won't say to defeat issue 2. That's why voters should vote
We
yes
are out
on
of
2.
time. We are out of time. Read up on this. It's an important issue. It'll be on the ballot. Issue number 2 on November 6th, the redistricting amendment. It's very complicated. Do your homework and then vote on November 6th. That's Columbus on the Record for this week. For our guests, for our previous panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.